Uh, there is a name sitting somewhere in the back of your mind right now. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly present, the way certain people remain present, even after the conversation has ended, even after the distance has settled in, even after you've done everything that was supposed to make the silence feel normal. A name you stopped saying out loud but never quite stopped thinking. A person you chose to step back from, or who stepped back from you, or both at the same time in that complicated way where no one person made the decision and yet somehow the communication stopped anyway. That person is about to re enter your life, and what they are carrying when they come back is not what you might expect. It is not what you prepared yourself for during all the time the silence held. It is something that is going to require you to look at this entire situation from the beginning with completely new eyes and understand something you couldn't see clearly when you were in the middle of it. I need you here for this, fully here, not half scrolling, not one eye on something else, because what these cards are showing me about what is coming from this person and what it means for your life right now is one of the most significant things I have seen in a reading in a very long time. And significant things deserve your complete attention. Subscribe to this channel if you're not already here, and drop the word silence in the comments right now, because that silence between you and this person, the one that felt like an ending, was never actually an ending. It was a pause, and the pause is over. Let me start with what I kept feeling the moment I connected to your energy today, because it came through before I even touched the cards, and it set the tone for everything that followed. What I felt was the particular emotional texture of unfinished business, not the painful, heavy, dragging kind that weighs a person down. Something lighter than that, and in some ways more persistent, the feeling of a conversation that got interrupted before it reached its natural conclusion, of something that was in the middle of becoming something and then simply stopped without the proper ending, without the resolution that would have allowed both people to carry it forward or set it down with clarity. That interrupted feeling lives in you around this person. And what the cards are telling me is that it lives in them too. That on their side of the silence, there has been the same subtle incompleteness, the same low level awareness that something between you never reached its actual conclusion, that what got communicated was not the whole truth, that what was left unsaid was in some ways more significant than what was said. The silence was not an answer, Virgo, for either of you. It was a postponement. And what is coming now is the thing that was postponed, arriving with the additional weight of everything that has happened in the time between then and now. Everything both of you have lived and learned and come to understand about yourselves in the months or years since the communication stopped. I want to tell you about the journey this person has been on since you stopped talking, because understanding where they've been will completely reframe what it means that they're coming back now and with this particular energy. When the communication between you ended, however it ended, gradually or suddenly, mutually or unilaterally, with words or simply with the slow disappearance of contact, this person entered a period that they would probably describe, if they were being completely honest, as one of the most clarifying periods of their life. Not pleasant necessarily, not easy, but clarifying in the specific way that loss clarifies things, that absence makes visible what presence obscured, that the removal of something from your daily life allows you to finally see with complete accuracy how much space it was actually occupying. They discovered what your absence felt like. Really felt like, not theoretically, not as something they could imagine in the abstract, but as a lived daily experience of moving through their life without the particular quality that you brought to it. And what they discovered was this: it felt like less, not dramatically, not in a way they could point to in a single moment and say, this is exactly what I'm missing. In the quiet, persistent, everyday way of a life that is objectively fine and yet somehow slightly diminished from what it was when you were in it. They tried to locate the source of that diminishment and address it, made new connections, invested in existing ones, kept themselves busy and forward moving, and refused probably to spend too much time sitting with what the loss actually felt like, because sitting with it felt like weakness or indulgence or both. They are not someone who finds it easy to acknowledge how much another person affects them. That acknowledgement requires a kind of vulnerability that does not come naturally to them. But the diminishment persisted quietly underneath everything else. And eventually, in a moment that may have been triggered by something specific, or may have simply arrived after enough time had passed, they stopped fighting the acknowledgement and let it be true. Let themselves admit privately, and then increasingly less privately, that they had made a mistake, that the silence, however it began, had gone on longer than it should have, that there was something unfinished between you that deserved to be finished differently than it had been. That admission is what you are about to feel the consequences of. Now I want to be precise about what this person is coming back with, because this matters enormously, and I don't want there to be any ambiguity about what the energy is showing me. This is not someone returning out of loneliness or convenience, or the passage of enough time that reaching out seems low risk. This is not someone who has exhausted their other options and circled back to you as a fallback. This is not someone testing the waters to see if you're still available without any intention of doing something real with that availability. What I'm seeing in their energy is intention. Specific, serious, thought through intention. They have not reached the decision to come back lightly, and they have not made it without considering what they actually want to happen when they do. They know what they want, they know what they should have done differently, and they are coming with that knowledge in hand with the humility of someone who is prepared to acknowledge that the silence was a mistake, and the willingness of someone who is prepared to do something different this time if you'll give them the opportunity. There is an accountability in their energy that was not there before. Whatever the dynamic between you was, whatever patterns existed in the communication, whatever imbalances, whatever things that were left unsaid because saying them felt too risky or too vulnerable or too likely to change something they weren't ready to have changed. There is a new willingness in them to address those things directly, to not hide behind the comfortable vagueness that human beings use to protect themselves from the consequences of full honesty. They are prepared to be honest with you, maybe for the first time in the way that actually matters. Let me speak now to what your role is in this, because the cards are not just showing me their return. They are showing me something about your own interior landscape right now that is worth examining carefully before this person arrives back in your life. There is a part of you that has been waiting. You may have told yourself you weren't waiting. You may have been genuinely and effectively moving forward with your life, building things, investing in other connections, keeping yourself fully present in everything that wasn't this. Virgo is extraordinarily capable of that kind of functional forward motion, of continuing to show up and produce and engage even when something underneath is unresolved. But underneath the forward motion, underneath the functional and the productive and the admirably together exterior, something has been sitting quietly in the place where this person used to be. Not grief exactly, not longing in the dramatic sense. Something quieter than that and more persistent, the specific feeling of a question that has never been answered, of something that had weight and meaning and was then just absent without explanation sufficient to account for its absence. That unanswered question is about to receive its answer, and the answer is going to be more complete than you anticipated, more honest, more vulnerable, more genuinely revelatory about what was actually happening on their side of things during the entire time you were connected and during the entire time you've been apart. You are going to understand things you didn't understand before about them, about yourself, about what existed between you that both of you may have underestimated or mishandled or simply not known how to hold properly at the time. Understanding does not obligate you to anything. I want to say that clearly. Whatever this person comes back with, whatever they say, whatever they offer, you are not obligated by the force of explanation or history or the genuine emotion of a reconnection to respond in any particular way. You get to feel everything that this return brings up without that feeling constituting a decision. You get to be moved without being committed. You get to be glad they came back and still take your time about what comes next. What the cards are asking from you is simply this: be open enough to hear it. Don't protect yourself from the conversation before it happens by deciding in advance what it means or what you're going to do about it. Don't let the self-protective part of Virgo that learned to manage disappointment by lowering expectations preemptively close a door that hasn't fully opened yet. Hear them out with the full, genuine, completely present quality of attention that you give to things that matter. This matters. There is something specific about the nature of what this reconnection offers that I want to describe because I think it will help you understand why the cards are showing this as significant rather than simply as the return of something that already had its chance. What was between you before was real, but it was also incomplete, not false real. But real in the way of something that never fully reached its potential because the conditions weren't quite right, because one or both of you wasn't quite ready, because the timing created obstacles that neither of you had the tools at the time to properly navigate. The connection was genuine and the circumstances were imperfect, and the combination of those two things produced something that was always slightly less than it should have been. What's coming back is the same genuine connection in different circumstances. Both of you changed by the time apart, both of you carrying new understanding, both of you, in your own way, more ready for what this could be than you were when it was first in front of you. That is not nothing. That is actually everything. Because the rarest thing in human relationships is not finding the right person. It is finding the right person at a moment when both people are ready to do the right thing with that rightness. And what the cards are suggesting is that this return, this specific moment of reconnection, is closer to that rare thing than anything that came before it. The version of this connection that is available now is better than what was available then, more honest, more grounded, more built on the actual people you both are rather than the people you are still in the process of becoming. What I see beyond this reconnection, what the cards are showing me about what becomes possible if you receive this with the openness it deserves, is a rewriting, not of the past stays what it was, but of the story you've been telling yourself about what the silence meant and what its permanent shape was going to be. The silence was not the end of this, it was a chapter. A painful, unresolved, ran too long chapter that neither of you wrote well. And what's coming is the next one, written with the benefit of everything that the difficult chapter taught you both. I see communication that is more real than it was before, more direct, less managed, less strategically careful, more willing to say the actual thing rather than the version of the thing that feels safer. Because both of you now know what it costs to leave things unsaid. You've both lived the consequence of that choice, and neither of you wants to live it again. I see a dynamic that is more equal than what existed before, more genuinely mutual, less weighted toward one person doing more of the emotional labor, one person waiting more, one person giving more than they were receiving. The imbalances that existed, and they existed even if you weren't always naming them, have been visible enough in the retrospect of the separation that they cannot return without being addressed. And the willingness to address them is part of what this person is bringing back with them. And I see underneath all of it something simple and real and worth everything that preceded it. The particular relief of something unfinished finally being finished, of a question finally being answered, of the quiet between you becoming intentional and chosen rather than a consequence of things left undone. That relief is close, Virgo, closer than any moment before this. There is one last thing, and it is perhaps the most important thing I could say as we close this reading. When they come, and they are coming, these cards are not equivocating about that resist the impulse to protect yourself by being smaller than what you feel. Virgo's first instinct in a moment of emotional exposure is to manage, to stay composed, to respond thoughtfully rather than honestly, carefully rather than completely, in a way that reveals just enough to be real, but not so much as to be vulnerable. This moment is asking for more than that. It is asking for the version of you that feels everything fully and says so. Not dramatically, you don't do dramatic, and this moment doesn't need it. Just honestly, with the specific courage of someone who has decided that being fully known in this moment matters more than being protected by partial disclosure. They are coming with their whole truth. Meet them with yours. That meeting two people who have been circling each other with all their complicated history and unfinished business, finally being completely honest with each other at the same time, is one of the most genuinely moving things that can happen between two human beings. It is about to happen for you. Tell me in the comments, do you know who this is? Did someone come to mind before I even finished the first paragraph? Drop the word silence if this landed somewhere specific and real. Tell me how long it's been. Tell me if you've felt the energy shifting before today. Tell me if some part of you already knew this was coming, because that part of you that already knew, that quiet, deep, endlessly perceptive Virgo instinct that picks up on things before they fully materialize, was right. It was right about this from the beginning. Stay open. I'll see you in the next one.